Welcome to the Pursuit of Progress podcast, where every episode is dedicated to helping you navigate the path to success as a personal trainer by downloading the lessons and strategies and maybe even failures from the minds, some of the best minds in the industry, like the individual that I have here with me today, Sir Tony Gentilecore. Welcome to the podcast.
I now will require that. My wife calls me that, refers to me that every time I walk through the door now. Sir, I like.
Yeah,
No,
I
I'm
would
just
like to
kidding.
hear. I would like
Today's
to
our
hear how
8th
that
anniversary.
goes.
No, that would not go well. Although today is our 8th wedding anniversary, so maybe I can ask her for one day only. Just refer to me. No, I wouldn't do that.
Happy anniversary. I appreciate you spending your anniversary with me.
Oh, as it happens, she's on a plane on her way down to Florida right now, so she's not even in the state. So
good for
who says
her.
romance is dead?
And for any of you guys who've been somehow sleeping under a rock in the fitness industry for the last decade or 2 decades, right? I don't want to age Sir Gentilecore here, but Tony Gentilecore is one of the co-founders of Cressey Performance, where he served as a strength coach from 2007 to 2015, and he now owns and operates his own studio in Brookline, Mass, called Core, where he tells people to lift heavy things. And if you guys are connected to this guy on social media, he likes to lift some stuff. He's pretty strong.
Yeah.
And he's the co-creator of the Complete Shoulder and Hip Blueprint and the Strategic Strength Workshop. It teaches courses all over the world. I've had the opportunity to hear him speak as well. And he's also a regular contributor to T Nation, Men's and Women's Health, as well as his own personal blog and website, Tony Gentilecore, which is where I have been following this guy for a long time, and probably one of the most entertaining writers, I would say. I mean, I'm going to give you that title, the entertainer of the century.
I have a unique voice for sure. I'm a hard person to plagiarize, I suppose.
And for those who are listening, guys, do yourself a favor, jump on either YouTube or also on Spotify. You guys can watch the video version of this. And other than that, the podcast should be available just about anywhere where podcasts are available. Tony, so for those who know you, as well as those who might be getting to know you, probably stalking you from some of the links that I'm going to put in the video description, you've been in the game a while, right? How long have you been a coach and trainer?
I entered the industry in 2002, and that was at a time where social media didn't exist. I think smartphones just started becoming a thing. maybe it was flip phones.
The little white Nokia flip phone.
The number one show, or at least the one I was watching, was Alias with Jennifer Garner.
Oh yeah.
It was a long time. Lost was up there too. That was in the rotation.
Wow.
It was a long time ago.
So you've been doing this a while then. Love it.
Yes.
Well, yeah. I'm gonna challenge your brain a little bit to think back, especially to when you first started out. And I know you had a stint playing baseball and in athletics. And it's always funny. I like diving in and seeing people's story prior to getting in, because there's just a lot of similarities amongst coaches that I find myself similar playing baseball. But talk to us, give us the origin story. Like, what got you into fitness and training of all the things you could have done back in 2002?
I'm not from another planet. I wasn't bitten by a spider. I watched a lot, although I did watch a lot of Sylvester Stallone movies, Arnold Schwarzenegger movies, Van Damme movies, through the 80s into the early 90s. So of course I'd be lying if I said that wasn't a little bit of an impetus into, how do those guys get so big? Like, I wonder what they did to do that. Like, that's kind of cool. I intuitively, I just I ran into strength training. I got my first weight set when I was, I believe, 12 or 13. I got one of those plastic covered cement plates with a little barbell and a very shoddy bench, and got one of those for Christmas one year. Put it in my parents' basement in the cellar, and I followed the poster, the pictures that it came with, and that was my introduction to lifting weights. And I grew up in a very small town in New York, middle of New York, Finger Lakes region. Like I said, it was my formative years were in the 80s into the early 90s. There wasn't much to do other than be outside and play myriad of sports, whether it was wiffle ball, baseball, basketball, kickball, soccer, name them all. I did them. And eventually I leaned more into baseball, and intuitively it was like, you know what, I bet if I get stronger, I would throw the ball harder, I would hit it further, I'd be a little bit faster. And that was more or less my introduction to lifting weights. Now, I did not know that I would become a fitness professional until after my baseball career, when I came to the sad conclusion that there weren't many major league teams looking for a right-handed pitcher that threw 87 miles an hour. I was good. I was looked at, but certainly no one was interested in me in that realm. So I transferred back to SUNY Cortland, State University of New York at Cortland, when I was done playing baseball, and finished my degree in health education. And it was either become a health teacher and wear pants and a tie to work every day, or become a personal trainer where I could wear sweatpants and drink protein shakes all day. So it wasn't a hard choice. I leaned into the personal training component. I had to do an internship the summer of my senior year at a corporate fitness center just outside Syracuse, New York. And it actually was a great dose of timing, where they hired me right when I was done with my internship. Like they were a position that opened up. I fit the bill, and I was there for 3 years working there, and then in various commercial gyms as just like a normal, regular, vanilla personal trainer. And then eventually, to kind of speed this up a little bit, that's what happens when you're in the industry for so long. You have lots of chapters.
Long stories. Yeah.
Yeah. I met Eric Cressey and a few other well-known individuals now in the industry, Mike Robertson, John Romanello, etc., on forums, training forums, on T Nation, on several other forums. We always cross paths in those forums that we used to hang out in. And I moved to Connecticut to live with Eric, because he and I both worked at the same gym in Connecticut for a year. And then we moved to Boston and opened up Cressey Sports Performance in the summer of 2007. And and it's just been a ride since then. I've grown to be an entrepreneur, which is something I never thought I would be. You mentioned writing. I've had a career with writing, which that would be, I think if my 11th grade teacher knew that I was getting paid to write in any fashion, she would be flummoxed. Like, how did that happen?
Yeah.
And I get to travel quite a bit, which I never thought I'd be able to do. Like, it's an honor that I get to travel around the United States, of course, but certainly over in Europe and Australia. And it's been great. Certainly, there was a massive monkey wrench the past few years for obvious reasons with travel, but yeah, I've been able to do that and teach a lot of upcoming and younger fitness professionals on, here's how I do things. I'm not saying I'm correct, but I know a thing or two. Hopefully it helps make your job a little bit easier and be more successful. And that's where I'm at today.
I love that. And I think it's cool for people to hear like what comes from, like, obviously you got into training and fitness, right? You're like, I'm just trying to work in sweatpants, never knowing that like writing and speaking and like there's just all these other opportunities that open up when you get good at training. So I just think it's cool for people to hear that. But taking it back to the training piece, especially let's say like that period before, before or around, even whenever you and Cressey met, you guys were opening the facility. How did you go about finding and getting clients like in those early days? Like, what were your strategies? What were your hacks to getting people?
Yeah, that came down to, well, in my first job at corporate fitness, I really didn't have clients. My job was more or less to be in the gym, and this company hired my company to basically run their gym. The employees would come in either before work, during their lunch break, after work, and they would come in and work out. And I was kind of there to kind of be their Sherpa. And I would say, hey, like, what do you feel like doing today? Want to work out? And like, let's do something. And it wasn't, they weren't clients per se.
Yeah.
But I did mention, like, early in my career, I did augment that with working in a commercial gym for a number of years, which I will say, even today, I always tell new trainers, you should work in a commercial gym the first 1, 2, 3 years of your career. I think, I know it's kind of poo-pooed on and people roll their eyes like, oh my God, be a personal, but I really feel that's still the one tried and true way that you can really get good and hone your skills as a trainer, because a lot of it is social, a lot of it is psychological, learning how to work with different personalities, different backgrounds, different ability levels, different goals, injuries. You're going to get access to that in a commercial gym, and I really feel that's the one way to make yourself, to hone your skills, to then be able to climb up that proverbial ladder in this industry. I will say, early in my career, as far as getting clients, I really had to learn to step out of my comfort zone. I'm an introvert through and through. I've never, that might surprise some people with when they see me present, or, and certainly with my writing style, and, even when I go on podcasts, I have to remind people that, introvertedness and extrovertedness is a spectrum. You're never just 100% one and 100% not the other. It's kind of a spectrum. And really what it comes down to is how you recharge. So when I am coaching, when I am presenting, when I know I have to be on, I am on. Like, I can be animated and like, be into it, and like, and stuff like that. But, for me to recharge and to re-energize, I really like not talking to people and kind of being in my own thoughts and reading a book and watching movies and being pretty quiet. So when I entered this industry, and I had to, especially when I entered the commercial gym industry, or that part, I really had to go out of my way to, okay, I have to introduce myself and like get out of my shell a little bit and be more talkative. And, with that, like, I learned pretty quickly that when you work in a commercial gym setting as a trainer, people don't want to be interrupted by a trainer when they're training. I would walk up to people all the time, be like, hey, and you would have it was kind of like the Scarlet Letter. You would have like the personal trainer on the back of your shirt, so they kind of knew what you were doing, which was kind of always kind of awkward, because like you're trying to solicit work. I mean, you're trying to pay your bills and make a living. And I had to learn the hard way, like, if people are working out more often than not and they have their headphones on and they're kind of doing their own thing, like, they don't want to be interrupted by some Joe Schmo trainer for 10 minutes trying to sell them, hey, you should start to a session with me, I can work with you, and we can, try to sell them on packages. How I did do it, however, and I learned this, and this was quite an epiphany for me, is as I was coaching my clients, other people would always be observing me. Like, you had to learn very quickly that you're always on display. You're always being observed. Even if you don't think you are, other people are watching you interact with your clients, and I will say, I picked up a lot of clients because, like, people would watch me in my coaching style. I didn't just stand there with my arms crossed and I was like looking the other way and like looking at my watch. Back then you really weren't checking your phone, so at least that helped in my favor. But I wasn't distracted by that. But people would see that when I was coaching people on their squats or their deadlifts or whatever, like, I was coaching at 90-degree angles. I was coaching from behind, from the side. I was peeking this way, peeking that way, adjusting people. I was a pretty engaged coach. And I think people like that. They would observe me doing that, as opposed to the trainer who was just standing there motionless with their arms crossed in a non-engaged manner, just counting reps. So I think my big piece of advice to new trainers, if you want to pick up new clients, be a coach and really understand that you are, especially in a commercial gym, you are being observed by other people, and people, and that, it's kind of like they're shopping for a car that way. If it came down to watching a trainer who was just standing there, being bored out of their mind with the client, as opposed to the other one who seems to be very engaged, and they're actually, in a non-weird way, putting their hands on individuals and putting them in better positions and coaching them up, I guarantee they're 9 times out of 10, they're probably going to pick the more engaged trainer. And in addition to that, another I can look back, and you told me how to really think back, and I am really thinking back here on what I used to
I
do.
like this. I like it.
I would, instead of interrupting people in their workout and trying to play and trying to avoid that awkward, hey, I'm a trainer here, maybe you want to start a session with me, and trying to avoid that at all costs, I would watch people train, whether it was a certain exercise, maybe they're doing a pull through, or maybe they're doing some sit-ups, or maybe they're doing a goblet squat. I would just really quickly give them a quick coaching cue. It's like, hey, this might feel better if you do this really quick. Or why don't you try this quick exercise? Let me show you really quick. And then I would just walk away. I wouldn't ask them for anything. I wouldn't say, hey, here's my card. I wouldn't do any of that. I would just offer a quick piece of advice, and I will leave. And I would even do that at least once a week, if not twice a week, with some people. And eventually they would seek me out when they were interested in hiring a trainer. Another thing I used to do is I would go out of my way, and I would I asked my then fitness managers if this would be cool, and they loved it. I took it on my own to offer kind of like deadlift, squatting, core training, whatever, shoulder health, like mini amuse-bouche, like 15, 20, 30-minute workouts for free. I would say, from this time to this time on this day, I'm going to be going through, deadlift technique. Like, let's clean up the deadlift. Let's go over squats. I'm going to do, some of my favorite core exercises. I used to love the core ones because people would attend those classes thinking I was going to put them through a bunch of planks and sit-ups and mountain climbers. And I'd be like, no, I'd be doing like Palloff presses and, like anti-rotation chops and like farmer carries and stuff like that. Just to give them a little bit of a idea of like my philosophy and the way I coach things, and probably introduce them to exercises that they normally wouldn't have done or even thought of doing. Yeah, and that's I think I threw 3 or 4 things out there that might be useful. I'm not sure.
I love that. We're gonna turn that into a social media post. Tony's top tips for getting clients. Yeah. And I think the awesome thing about that is, like, regardless of, whether it was 10 years ago, 15 years ago, today, yesterday, next week, like, those coaching pieces don't change regardless of like exercises, trends, industry. Like, it's coaching, right?
Yeah. You hit the nail on the head. Like, again, this is a little bit of the times, but even if I was talking 5 years ago or 10 years ago, what I wouldn't say is like, the latest Instagram reel that I put up really got me all these clients. That doesn't fucking happen. Like, it really, you have to coach, and you have to be a people person, and you have to learn how to temper your coaching style to meet the needs and the ability level of the potential client or your current clients. And people respond to their name, using their name, and people respond to showing them, how something can feel better. And, if someone's shoulder hurts and I can say, hey, on the bench press, your shoulder hurts. Maybe you need to work on like tucking your shoulders together a little bit more and pulling them down into more depression, getting them in a more set position. And then they bench press and it doesn't hurt their shoulder. I mean, that takes me 10 seconds to show them that. And they're going to be, whoa, if he can make my shoulder feel better in a matter of like 10 seconds, what else has he got up his sleeve? So being a coach and using those type of skills, in my opinion, is always going to trump, anything you can do on Instagram or TikTok, that doesn't draw you any business. It really doesn't. I mean, just because you have a bunch of likes next to something doesn't equate to you getting money from somebody. So yeah, I would say, the coaching, as old school as you want to go, is always going to be the way to go to gain success in this industry.
Yeah, and I think that's you see a lot of people trying, and we get it as we have people coming through the certifications and asking right away about like, all right, I want to go right into online training and coaching. And I think because they think it's like, oh, this is going to be an easier route for me. And maybe it's like, there's like a social, like, oh, well, I'm not going to have to talk to people. But like you said, there's a big difference. And I would venture to say I know far more coaches who do really well in the beginning and may have zero social media presence whatsoever. They're just in person, like you were talking about.
Yeah. I mean, I think, in this day and age, it's wise to have your toes dipping in both pools, so to speak. I mean, I think
Yeah.
it comes with the times. Like, yes, I think you need to be good at in-person coaching. I would make the case that you're not going to be a good online coach if you're an awful in-person coach. When it comes to the coaching cues you use, or even your programming. Like, if you're not actually working with real people and writing programs for real people, you're not going to be that good in the online format. I'm not saying it's not possible, but I have a hard time believing that any coach that's very successful in the online realm hasn't already been a very successful coach in person coaching as well. And again, when it comes to talking to people and blah blah blah, I get it. And I am not a rah-rah coach. I think there's this connotation in the industry that in order to be successful, you have to be like this animated rah-rah, let's go coach. And I've never been that way ever. I think people prefer authenticity than fake. I don't know what you want to call it. I really don't know what term I would use there. But I think people get a little eye rolly when they are working with somebody who is that. And I see it often when I'm traveling and whatever city I'm in, like I usually always visit some form of commercial gym, and I'm just there to get a workout in. And I'm a coach. I'm always observing. So I observe other coaches, and even I get eye rolly when I'm watching someone being really, really over the top enthusiastic. To me, that just comes across as fake. And if I'm thinking that, I have to assume the client might be thinking that. I don't know, but so I think people just got to get out of their head a little bit and thinking that what they see on Instagram, with people being over the top and super enthusiastic and rah 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 and clapping their hands and jumping all over the place, that is not real life. It is not realistic. And I don't. Maybe I'm coming across as some kind of curmudgeon here, but I just think the reality is that's not it's just not realistic.
Well, I would, first off, like, these conversations have been a lot of fun for me since starting the podcast, because there were I'd say some patterns that I already kind of thought about people who've been training, some for a long time, some for just a few years, but, who have seemed to be doing well, gaining traction with clients. And it seems to be that I continue to come across more and more like the pattern, and maybe it's my own little bubble, right? So there's some bias there. More and more like great coaches, or those that get busy with clients and have a consistent flow, that really are like what you might call the ambiverts. They really are like internally powered, but obviously can turn it on for people. Do you feel like there's some truth to that, like with the coaches in your life and circle that you've been around?
I think that kind of explains how I work to a T. Like like this whole idea of being introverted, extroverted is a spectrum. So, I mentioned to you before we started filming that I go coach. I'll be coaching in 2 hours. And I what works for me, and this is something that people have to think about. Early in my career, I did one-on-one coaching because I worked in commercial gyms. In the early 2000s, like, there really wasn't such a thing as semi-private training. Like, when you hired a personal trainer, it was one-on-one. Now, when I was at Cressey Performance, we adopted via Alan Cosgrove this idea of semi-private training, where one coach is working or coaching 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 people at a time. Like, I rarely ever get above a 5-to-1 ratio. I just feel like anything over in that, it's just too much. But I will say, me personally as a coach, I am a way more engaged coach when I'm working with 2, 3 people at a time as opposed to one. Because then, selfishly, I don't always have to be the impetus of conversation. I mean, I can do it. Yeah. Like, certainly I have people skills. Like, I know how to initiate conversation with clients, and it's not about training. Like, I think another thing to consider too is, like, coaches need to do a better job of talking like a human and not breathing, eating, drinking, strength and conditioning at all times. Your clients don't give a fuck about that. They want to talk about what's on Netflix. Hey, what are you watching now? Like, what movies you go see? How the kids doing? Oh, you got a new dog. That's great. What are their names? What kind of, that's the type of conversations that, like, real coaches are having with their clients. They're not talking about, accommodating chain resistance on their deadlifts. That's just not happening. Or, okay, in terms of scapular upward rotation, like, what do you think your top 5 drills are? Like, those aren't conversations we're having with our clients. But I will say, when I'm working semi-privately, and I learned this when I was at Cressey Sports Performance, is that I'm a more engaged coach, because then when I have 2, 3, 4 people in there, like, they are talking and doing a lot of the socializing, and I'm just kind of entering in on that. Like, I have my hip hop playing in the background. I listen to a lot of 90s hip hop in my studio, and then people are deadlifting and squatting, and we're just chilling, having lifting heavy things and getting after it, and then having conversations in between. So I know I went off on a little bit of a rant there, but I will say, if you're a coach, like, again, you don't want to stand there with your arms crossed and like legs crossed and leaning up against the wall and just kind of casually counting reps. Like, you don't want to be that coach, but you certainly don't have to be the one that's smacking people's butts and jumping up and down and yelling really loud. I mean, for some people that works. I mean, don't get me wrong. Some clients like that. This is not to say there aren't people out there that like that. Like, when, I worked at Cressey Sports Performance, I worked with predominantly more athletes anyway. They'd be more prone to that type of behavior, as opposed to, Phil from accounting, who just wants to, like, learn how to squat correctly without it hurting his knees. So, it's a temper system. Like, you got to learn where to ramp it up and when to ramp it down. And that's just going to be predicated on the individual you're working with. But any above and all, it's going to be being yourself. I get a little bit, I know I've used this word a little bit too much already, but when people talk about authenticity and be your authentic self, like, even that seems inauthentic to me when people constantly say that. I'm being my authentic self. I'm just what the fuck does that even mean? Like,
why does it have an extra word?
Yes, like, but but of course there is some truth in that. Like, I think people can smell bullshit, and like, they can smell when you're not being the actual person you are. So don't forget that as a coach. Like, just be yourself, but have regular conversations and coach people up. It's really not that hard.
I can relate to that, though, because I feel like, even for me, whenever I really got into training, coming across individuals that I looked up to in the industry, like you, even, like when I first got into like working with clients, coming across like Todd Durkin, and like you got someone who's just like bananas energy, and then trying to do that, and then you're like, this isn't me. Like, it just doesn't come across the right way.
And I would make the argument that most people do better with less coaching, less talking. I think we can overwhelm a lot of our clients with an abundance of coaching, where they do a set of trap bar deadlifts, and then you're spewing out 5 different drills or 5 different cues that they got to fix on their next set, and it's like, oh, what? Sometimes, I mean, I more often than not, like, when I have coaches and other trainers come observe me, they'll see me coaching somebody or a group of people, and they'll watch one of my clients do a deadlift, and I'm watching my client do the deadlift, and I won't say a word. And sure, not every rep is perfect. It's not like, it isn't a Wikipedia page definition of like immaculate deadlifting technique. And they'll look at me like, oh, are you not going to fix that? Like, what about that? I was like, no. I mean, sometimes you got to allow clients to figure shit out, and like, they have to understand what a bad rep feels like, or a bad-ish rep feels like. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not letting people like hurt themselves. I mean, there is a line I don't want them to cross. Like, I'm not just it's not like Mad Max out there of like deadlifting technique. But I think, allowing people a window of like feeling what a little bit of a non-optimal position is like, or what a bad repetition feels like, and then letting them complete their set. And once they're done with their set, you say, hey, on this next set, I want you to concentrate on this one thing. Boom, that's it. And then on the next set, it'll probably fix itself. That's coaching. So I think sometimes less is more with coaching as well. coaching to me, there's a fine line. You mentioned Todd Durkin. I often think of Martin Rooney as well, or Mark Fisher. All
100%.
Wonderful speakers, very entertaining speakers, and awesome, fantastic coaches. There's a fine line between being entertaining when you're presenting and being entertaining when you're coaching. I don't think that Venn diagram is as big as we think. Like, I doubt many of the people who we deem very animated, like phenomenal presenters, are necessarily the same way when they're coaching. I mean, I'm sure some are as well, but it's just not the same thing. So unfortunately, I understand why people feel like, oh, that's how they are and presenting. That must be how they coach, and that's how I have to be coaching to be successful. I'd venture not. That's probably not the case.
Well, I feel like you kind of touched on this a little bit already, but maybe like add anything in regards to like your coaching or your training philosophy. Like, what I took away from what you were just talking about, especially from the coaching side of things, was like oftentimes simple is best, less is more. How else would you describe your coaching or training philosophy?
Yeah. I'm all about what I deem the trainable menu, and trying to find what people can do and not harp on what they can't do. Whether, I have people come to me all the time who are injured. Like, they might come to me post physical therapy, or, maybe their lower back isn't feeling great, or they've worked with various trainers in the past and no one can solve their knee problem or their shoulder problem. I'm not a physical therapist. I'm certainly not diagnosing anything, but I was like, okay, well, let's focus on what you can do and not what you can't. I've always operated under the assumption that we can train around pretty much any injury. I believe. Certainly, you have to respect the operation window, and people need to rest after an operation and treatment or physical therapy. But even if people aren't injured, I'm a big fan of just keeping it simple and setting them up for as much success as possible. Like, I can't recall the last time I started working with a client in week 1 and had them back squatting 3-rep maxes out of the gate or anything like that. It's like, okay, we're going to start with a goblet squat, and there's progressions, or there's a system that I like. If they can prove to me they can do this exercise very well with this much weight, then they graduate to the front squat, then they graduate to this, and they graduate to that. And that, for some people, it could be a week, it could be a month, it could be 6 months. Everyone's a little bit different. But I think so long as you don't overwhelm your clients and just show them that, progression isn't always linear. My wife just blogged about this the other day. I wrote about this on her Instagram the other day because she's working her way back up to a heavy deadlift, that there's going to be peaks and valleys. It's never going to be linear. And you kind of have to lean into that. I always tell my clients, and I always tell trainers when I'm talking about this, and this is a Dan John quote, so I certainly can't take credit for it, but easy training is good training. I'm never the type of coach that's going to murder people on their sessions, to the point where they can't feel the left side of their face and they're walking in a pool of sweat and they're just like a walking dead when they leave a session. I always tell my clients, like, if you leave a session feeling like that you can do more work, that's a good thing. Because that tells me that you're probably going to recover from this workout, and that you're probably going to come in either the next day or the day after that and get after it again and hit it hard. And this isn't to say that they're easy workouts, but I want them to recover from those workouts, and I want them to be able to walk after their workouts. And to me, it's all about, I think Josh Bryant says this a lot. They're brick by brick workouts. Like, I think if you're trying to build strength, and I'm a big guy of just helping people build strength, you need to build it, not test it. That you got to do that with sub-maximal work, meaning we're working in the 70 to 85% of 1-rep max range. Like, that's really where the bulk of our training is. And you're just going to get a fuck ton of repetitions in that range. And we're going to make the base wider so then you can get to a higher peak. Because I do think a lot of people get in their own way where they're incessantly testing their strength. They're testing their bench every week. They're testing their squat every week or every 2 weeks. And they never build their strength because they're missing reps all the time, and they're stapling themselves on their bench another day. I think if you're missing reps all the time, and if you're a trainer and your clients are missing reps all the time, that's not a good thing. What are we doing? What are we building there? Nothing. We're building failure. So I want my clients to hit all their reps and to do some grinding. This isn't to say they're not doing hard work, but easy training is good training, and they're going to learn the basic barbell lifts and the basic movement patterns. They're going to work on their hinge. They're going to work on their squat. They're going to do pushing, pulling, carrying, single leg work. And, and I just fill in the gaps with what their goals are. And if they have an injury history or a current injury, and I just try to fill in the gaps there.
Yeah. So if you were working with or mentoring, and I know you do in many ways, newer trainers or coaches, especially those who they're just out of certification, there's always a gap in understanding, like, how do I start to program for clients? Like, I learned all these things, and now there's the programming piece. What would you suggest for them, even like resources or ways to learn some of this stuff?
Yeah,
Like, what do you think is the best way?
I think number one is hiring your own coach. So I think, I've written thousands of programs, and the last person I want to write a program for is myself. That's the last person I want to write a program for. So I have a coach that writes my programs, and I do consider that continuing education, because it's quite interesting to see how they program from a month-to-month basis for my goals. Like I want to deadlift a fuck ton of weight, and I want to be strong. And I always joke that my goal now that I'm a dad, I'm 46. I just want to be the strongest dad in my kids' kindergarten, and I'm pretty sure I'm there. I'm fairly certain I'm there. But I'm not a competitive guy. Like, I don't compete in powerlifting. I don't do CrossFit. I don't bodybuild. But I will say, hiring your own coach to write your programs is valuable. I've learned a lot with my current coach, and I'm always reminded working with her that linear progression or linear periodization works. I think we like to get cute with our programming, where we're using undulated periodization or concurrent periodization, and we're doing all these metrics with our programming, when it's really like, okay, 1 week they're doing 3 sets of 8 on an exercise, say for accessory work. Next week they're going to do 3 sets of 10. The week after that, 4 sets of 8. The week after that, 4 sets of 10. It's really, you just got to, in some way, get your clients to do a little bit more work week to week. And linear periodization works. I've actually gotten more into, and certainly I'm not like mind-blowing stuff here, but using the RPE system, even with my Gen Pop clients. So, for those who aren't familiar with it, RPE, rate of perceived exertion. Although instead of exertion, I like to say effort. I think once you start using rate of perceived exertion with clients, they're kind of like, what does that mean? But if I say effort, they're like, hey, oh, you mean how hard this exercise is, or how hard am I working? Yes, that's what I'm after. I'll have my clients, for their main lift of the day, whether it's, say, deadlift day, work up to, I'll say, okay, you're going to work up to 1 set of 5 at an RPE of 9. Now, an RPE of 9 means that they have 1 rep left in the tank. So a 10 is like an all-out max. They can't possibly do another repetition. They're gonna ramp up, and they're gonna take as many sets as they need to work up to 1 set of 5 at an RPE of 9. And once they get there, then I'm going to say, okay, now to get some reps in, we're going to take 90% of that load, and we're going to do 2 sets of 5 or 3 sets of 5 of that load. Does that make sense? And what I like about this system is that it takes into account daily or weekly fluctuations in how people feel. So some days people feel great and they can push the envelope and maybe even hit a PR. Other days they might feel like garbage, and it's just like, it's just not, I don't feel it today. I don't care. I just want them to get the work in. And so, it's just simple as that. And then I don't really have to worry about, like, okay, what percentage are we using this week? And like, I'm just saying, well, we're just going to work up to a heavy triple, a heavy set of 5 or whatever at this weight. And then we're going to take 90% of that or 85% of that or 95% of that, whatever, and do some extra repetitions with that weight. But yeah, how's that, Joe?
Yeah, no, that's great. And for anyone who's listening, I know that you might want to go back and listen to that again, because I feel like that was like decades of wisdom simplified, and it's crazy. I mean, first off, like for me, I just think about how long it's taken me to get to a place where I would program in a similar manner, and
Sure.
that daily approach. And then listening to more and more coaches they've been doing it for 10, 15, 20 years and are following a very similar, especially with strength, on just trying to keep it simple, find ways to progress a little bit.
Because that's the thing, is a lot of my clients, I have a lot of self-selecting clients. Like they read my stuff and they kind of know what they're getting themselves into when they reach out to me when they start training, or they hey, I want to work on my squat, deadlift, bench press, and I'm going to work with Tony because I know he's a strength guy. I truly believe that strength is the building block for anything that everyone would want to work on anyway. So whether you want to work on aesthetics or power or endurance or agility, if you don't have a base of strength, I'm not saying you have to be power lifter strong, but if you don't have like a base of strength, it's going to be hard to improve upon those other qualities. And, if I like to dictate my sessions on like a main lift of the day. So, most Gen Pop clients, most personal trainers are going to be working with people who are maybe working out 2 to 3 times a week, basically. And I think each of those 2 or 3 days should have a main lift. So a compound lift, a multi-joint lift, whether it's a chin up, a bench press, a deadlift variation, squat, Romanian deadlift, whatever. And then after that, you write your accessory work to complement either a strength or technique flaw in that main lift, or hitting like the muscles that work that same lift as well. So if I have somebody deadlift as their main lift of the day, their accessory work is going to be something that addresses a technique flaw in their programming. So let's say if someone is rounding their upper back a lot on their deadlift, and I see that no matter how much coaching or cueing them, they're rounding their back, even when they're not using a lot of weight, I would say, well, they probably need some more upper back strength. So it stands to reason their accessory work should be more upper back work. So dumbbell rows, chest supported rows, seated cable rows, row, TRX rows, also posterior chain, hamstrings, glutes. What are exercises that train the hamstrings and glutes? Pull throughs, hip thrusts, reverse lunges, Romanian deadlifts, reverse hypers, like all those work. So, program design isn't that hard. I think we get pressured into thinking that we have to be cute and fancy with our programming, when I think the more simple, the better. And I guarantee your clients will appreciate a more simple workout. Because if they do that hard, that's really all that matters. I'd rather a client do a really simple exercise hard and get after it than some elaborate program that they barely comprehend, nor does the trainer comprehend half the time. and they're just kind of like half-assing through it. So there's my 20 years of programming wisdom in 2 sentences.
Boom.
Right there.
Boom. For free, guys, for free. No, that was great. That's awesome. And honestly, like we've had a lot of requests for like programming type conversation. So I'm glad we got to dig into that a little bit. I'm going to shift you over a little. What's the longest standing client that you have as of right now?
Currently that I have? Right now, I just had a conversation with a client on Saturday. We've been working together since 2011.
Wow, that's awesome.
So it's a long time. And I'd be lying if I said like there's sometimes I'm like, what the heck am I gonna do with this guy? Like I've done everything, but
we've gone through everything.
But I just go back to the basics. I mean, really, it just makes my life easier, and it makes their life easier when they just keep it simple. And but I would say the majority of my clients now, like right now, I think I have. Like I work out of a training studio that's about 500 square feet. It's not very big. I personally myself have 43 clients that I work with in person. And most of those clients have been with me for multiple years. People. Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. But I would say the bulk of those clients like stay with me. They've been with me for as many years as I've been there. And, that's why I'm always telling trainers, like, be more concerned about keeping your current clients happy than worrying about, okay, I have to get 2 or 3 more every month because all these other ones are leaving. Well, why are they leaving? They're so early. Why are they leaving after one package? Like that, if that's a common theme with you as a trainer, why is that? Because I would argue that shouldn't be the case. I would think that after most of the time, if they have no idea who I am and they were referred to me from a friend or current client, and if they don't re-up with me after going through their first cycle of programming, I'm just thinking, okay, what did I do wrong? What did I do? What where was my message missed? Or, did I overstep? Was I overzealous with my programming? Was I too complicated? Or what did I do? And, there's a reason why, like, I maintain a monthly roster of 40 plus personal training clients in a really tiny studio. That's not even counting my online stuff. So yeah, they stick around for a while because I listen to them. I don't program things that I don't do myself. I practice what I preach, and it sounds weird, but I write programs based on their goals. Weird.
It's a weird concept for retention.
When you do that for people, they appreciate that. Like, I have many clients who are runners. Like, I live in Boston. Boston is a very endurance based community. There's a lot of people who do a lot of running. I don't run, but I program them, and I'm adding in extra lower leg limb stuff. I'm doing a lot of I'm doing a lot of tib anterior work, a lot of calf work, a lot of making sure they're getting more hip flexion. I'm not trying to make a bunch of power lifters, like, because I don't compete in powerlifting, but I do use the barbell and dumbbells and kettlebells to get them stronger, and to get into ranges of motion, into movement patterns that they don't normally get into in their everyday life or their everyday sport. Whether they're a casual endurance athlete or soccer or whatever. So yeah.
So I would assume then it's fair to say that, like, it's pretty obvious for your clients when they come in that, like, the program they're doing is, like, real specific to them. Like, you're in tune with what they're looking for.
I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, I'm not reinventing the wheel with every client. Like, I mean, I certainly, if I start with a new client and they're fairly similar to a past or a current client I already have, like, I'll go to that current client's program and bring that up and tweak it to this individual. For sure. Yeah. Like, I mean, there's no point in making my job harder, because I think where the other value comes outside of the individualized programming is the coaching that they're going to get. I often, like I said, I mentioned earlier, I have people who come observe me, and they're often amazed. Maybe amazed is the strong word. Maybe I shouldn't say amazed, but they're often like eyebrows are raised when there's some clients that come in for a session and, like, we don't even talk to each other. They just start their warm up, they start their lift, and they're like, you barely talk to that person outside. You didn't really coach them that much. It's like, yeah, because I spent 5 years coaching them. It's
they're good now.
Yeah, so it's like, I mean, they still come and get coaching because they want me to write their programs and, like, whatnot. And, like, I'm the one that's like telling them, okay, do this, add more weight, take more weight off. Like, that's looking off today. Why don't we stay put? Like, I'm doing that still. But, if I've done my job well, a client should be able to come in and do their own session. I mean, they should be able to look at their program, understand, like what they understand, like, okay, these are the exercises I'm doing today. Here's how I'm going to warm up. Here's how I'm going to progress my ramp up sets to my work weight. Here's what I'm going to do for that. I often joke that a lot of my clients, they travel for work. So I often say, like, I want to get them to the point where they can walk into any hotel gym and figure it out. Like, it could just be dumbbells up to 15 pounds. They have a treadmill, they have a roll of duct tape, and they can make a workout. Like, if I get them to that point, I feel like I've done my job as a coach well.
I like that. MacGyver, fitness MacGyver.
Yeah, basically.
How have now maybe more just on like your experience as a coach and trainer in the industry, how have your clients either impacted you or like what have you learned from your clients, right? I mean, obviously you
Yeah.
spend a lot of time with some of these people.
I mean, I've learned a lot from my clients how, via my wife. My wife is a psychologist, and I've learned a lot from her, um, with my relationship with my clients. Because I think as trainers and as coaches, we will take it personally if a client isn't getting results. So if a client's saying, "Oh, I'm not losing as much fat as I would like," or "I'm not making as much progress in this workout that I would like," that we ourselves take it personally. Okay, what are we doing wrong? When that's not necessarily the case at all. We know we're writing the program for the individual, like we're communicating with them. What they do in the other 23 hours that they're not with us is not on us. I mean, we could tell them to go to bed and drink more water, and limit the midnight snacking, but are they actually doing that? We don't know. But
Yeah.
so I would say, with all the hundreds, if not thousands of clients that I've worked with in over 2 decades of work, it's really helped me understand that, as a coach, like learning to temper my style to certain individuals, like, I mean, that's important. I mean, I feel like that's, you have to kind of be, you have to be, what's the word I'm looking for? Adaptable, when it comes to coaching different people. But what's nice too is like I've learned a lot of life lessons from my coach. I mean, what's nice about being a coach in the area that I coach is, I have a lot of lawyers and doctors and financial advisors, and and having just normal life conversations with people. Like,
Yeah.
it's amazing how much like advice you get that other people would pay for. So that's always a nice perk. But I'm always reminded too that I learned this through COVID, that when I was doing Zoom sessions with my clients, which I hated, like I abhorred doing Zoom sessions with my clients. I could not stand it.
Yeah.
But
I'm
I
with you.
learned during that it wasn't about me. I needed to do it for them anyway, because I was their break. And even now, in when people come to me in person during the week, I mean, I'll have a client that will come in tonight. He's a lawyer. He's in his upper 60s. He comes in every week, every Tuesday night. He comes for a session. He's like, "This is the highlight of my week. I love coming in on Tuesday nights," and that's awesome. Like, that and I have to remind myself that I am oftentimes a break from their life for them to come in and like lift some heavy shit, listen to some cool music, and just hang out for an hour and a half and just train. I think that's a valuable mantra to keep in the back of my mind, that is when I'm having a bad day, I can't go there and continue having the bad day. I kind of have to put it to the side a little bit and be there for them. And likewise, they do it for me too. Like, when we're in an industry where it can be very rewarding. When you help a client get out of lower back pain, when you prove to a client that they can do stuff, that they can do a pull-up, and they can do 5 push-ups, and they can do stuff that they thought they couldn't do. I think that's a cool perk of our job in our industry.
Yeah, and like you said, it's a very easy line for a lot of coaches to cross between, like you said, there's the connection there, like, you're absorbing so much from people, right? They're telling you all kinds of things you were never
Sure.
ready to hear. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, it's okay for me to do that to them. And like you said, they're in there for an escape. And so all of a sudden it just starts to muddy the water on that relationship. And I'm sure you've been in environments where you've seen other coaches do a lot of that. I know I have.
Well, I mean, that just comes down to boundaries.
Yeah.
That my wife is the expert in talking about that. Like, she consults with a lot of gym owners, and fitness industry people about creating better boundaries with colleagues, as well as clients. Because you hit the nail on the head, Joe. Is like our clients sometimes will bring up some pretty personal stuff in a session, and you're just like, no, 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 no.
Just,
you know,
just pretend I didn't
I
hear
feel
it.
like I've gotten pretty good at like changing the subject very quickly. Like, oh man, how about the Celtics? Like, oh man, like, but yeah, that's just a matter of boundaries, and but that comes with practice, of course, and knowing, what your personal boundaries are. Like mine, for example, are going to be like, when I'm at work, I don't talk about politics. I don't talk about religion. And that's basically it. I think everything else is more or less free game. I think, and there have been times where clients have gotten into spats about politics, and I have to kind of be like, okay, what's your next set? Like, okay, let's work on, there's ways to diffuse that. And I've also, another personal boundary of mine is, there are certain days of the week that I don't coach, and I just tell clients, hey, do you coach? Do you have any times on Thursdays? Like, sorry, I'm not in on Thursdays. Like, I just don't. That's my Saturday basically is Thursday, and I just learned that I'm, if I set boundaries in that way, that just keeps me sane, and it keeps me mentally fresh. That I have that boundary in place.
I like that. So how do you personally define success at the end of the day as a coach and trainer? Like, what does that look like for you?
Oh my God, that's a deep question.
I know we're going in.
I mean, I guess if no one has to go to the hospital at the end of the day, that's a good day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Man, how would I describe success? I mean, really, I just want my clients to be happy, and feel like that they feel heard. And that I care, and that they get a sense of empathy with me. Like I think there's this connotation in the industry too, that you have to be some kind of hardo coach, and it's not lost to me that I'm a bald, white, like strength coach. Like, we're going to lift heavy things. And I'm just like, I'm not that person. I think my clients, if they feel like they're being heard and that I have a sense of empathy with them, that, hey, I get it. Like you had, like, your kid kept you up late last night and you don't feel it today, or, your boss is an awful person and you want to stab them in the eye. Like, I get it. But, so I think so long as my clients feel like they're getting results, and that when they come train with me, that it's a safe space, that they can be themselves. And, I'm happy with that. And of course, I love it when people hit deadlift PRs too. So that's always a fun day as well.
So I got two more questions for you.
Sure.
Make good use of your time today. One of those is one that I tend to ask everyone. One's one that it kind of shifts and rotates. But when it comes to the future of the industry, right? You got to give me, like, what do you think is going to stay the same? What do you think is changing? Especially thinking, like, for people who are listening who might be new getting into the industry, where are things going? And where are things going, but also what's not going to go away?
I don't think interpersonal relationships are going to go away. I think, I think we've been inundated with Chat GPT for the past 2 months or 3 months, however long that conversation's gone. And I even had a former client come up to me in the park the other day saying that he wrote, like, these metrics in the Chat GPT about, I need a full body program using a TRX and something else. And he said they actually spit out a pretty good program. Like, I was actually kind of freaked out by it, that it was actually a very, like, well thought out, in quotations, program. And I was like, that's fine, but who's going to coach you through it? Like, who's going to tell you that you're doing an exercise incorrectly, or who's going to progress it? How is ChatGPT going to tell you to increase weight, decrease weight, stuff like that? So that's what I mean about interpersonal coaching skills. I think that's really what people seek out when they want to hire a personal trainer or a coach. Is, they want to get results, certainly, and they want to hire a professional that has expertise in movement and strength and conditioning and et cetera. But it's also that human connection that you are that they want as well. Like, who's going to tell them to progress and show up? Like, I mean, certainly there's that motivational factor too. So I don't think that's going to go anywhere anytime soon. I think during COVID we had this idea that the industry was just going to go completely virtual. I actually think that that's not the case. I think a lot of stuff that was virtual, I've heard horror stories of many companies that were like gaining momentum with virtual only to like now flounder, unfortunately, because they went all in on virtual. I just think in-person training is not going to go anywhere anytime, anywhere soon, is because when people go to a commercial gym or they go see their trainer at a studio, that is their third space. For many people, like I mentioned already, like, when people say they come to me and like I'm the highlight of their week, like that is because I am their break from work, family, etc. So, I think that's valuable. I don't think it's going to go anywhere. So, I'm not someone that prognosticates, and I don't consider myself a pundit on, the trends in the industry. Cause I'm probably the last person to talk about trends, because I get these emails at the end of each year where the magazines and online or websites will go, oh, what are the trends for 2024? And I'm like, barbells still work. Like,
I'm still training, maybe. That's it.
So I don't know. Hopefully I answered your question there. I know it probably wasn't very
definitely
sage, but
no, that was perfect. And then my last question for you, actually, this is kind of a little tradition that we're creating here on the podcast, is answering a question from our previous guests, and then getting to create a new question for the next guest that we have on. So our last guest, his question was surrounding like what wakes you up every day. And I say that specifically, obviously you've been training for quite a while, and you've been working with clients, and some people in the industry go away from training. I'm like you, I love coaching and training. And so I don't see myself not doing it anytime soon. So what is it that gets you like fired up to wake up and go do that every day?
I will say my bladder is what wakes me up every morning. So there's that. There's that. I'm at a point in my career, and again, this is probably just me, someone who's been in this industry for a while, that I feel like I'm content with just kind of like hovering and like staying the course, and like not falling into the trap of like the social pressure of like, that we get on social media, that you have to be like doing this and doing that and this. And I have to say, like, since COVID, I've actually backed away from social media quite a bit, because I just find it obnoxious and absurd at times, where it's like, no one cares that you're walking on the beach and, eating a papaya kale smoothie. I have like, I think I mentioned off air that I'm expanding to a larger facility or larger space next year, which is anxiety inducing enough. That I'm going to basically be, I'm moving from a 500 square foot facility to 5,300, half of which is going to be gym space. I'm going to sublet to other trainers. And the other half is going to be psychotherapy, physical therapy, massage therapy, nutrition. So that, figuring out the logistics of overhead and like the build out, that's going to wake me up in the morning for sure. But, I'm at a point in my career where I'm actually very content with just kind of like coaching 4 days a week, hanging out with my kiddo. We every Friday, the highlight of my week, I spoke about my clients' highlights. My highlight of the week is on Fridays, I pick up my little guy at kindergarten, and we go to Two Dudes Being Bros, where I take him to jiu-jitsu, and then after that, we go have pizza, we go have ice cream, and we've been doing that every Friday for like 3 years. And
that's awesome.
It's fantastic. So, and hanging out with my wife and kid, and just kind of understanding like this. I really think it's important to have a separation of work and personal life, and having a balance between the two. I think, what brings me happiness is knowing that, yes, I have a successful career. I have clients who are very loyal to me, as well as readership that is very loyal to me, which is great. I worked hard for that. And, I'm cognizant of that. But I also think it's important to have a life outside of the industry, and that you know, and having hobbies that I enjoy that aren't fitness related. Like I don't live in the gym. Like I have a life outside of working out all the time. Like I love going to the movies. I love reading books. I love watching shows with my wife. I love traveling. I'm obsessed with London. I mean, in a past life, I was British. I swear to God, awesome. I love London. So I think that's what makes me happy. It's just this idea of like, okay, there's work life and, you know, you have to turn it on when you have to turn it on. But, you know, I am able to turn it off when I have to and when I feel like when I need to, and I can enjoy life outside of the industry. Does that make sense?
Love that. Love that. And then my last one then would be for the question that you want to leave. You obviously don't know who our next guest is going to be. And we have some individuals with a ton of experience in the industry, entrepreneurs, multiple businesses, others who are in their first 5 years and just gaining traction. What would you want to know?
I know it all, Joe. What are you talking about?
I know. Guys, he wasn't prepared for this.
Good question.
I'm throwing at it.
I think, you know, what would be their advice to a fitness professional looking to grab that balance between in person, okay, growing that audience and that brand, but also understanding the role of like, okay, we live in the 21st century and we have to lean into that. Like what would be their advice in growing that component as well? Like, do they feel like we have to go all in on online, or do they find value in having, like what I said earlier, toes dipping in both? Because I mean, I do have colleagues who are they crush online, and I'm like, the numbers they're putting up, I'm like, what am I doing in my life? Like, I was like,
you're like,
yeah. But you know, I'd be curious, like what their advice would be, like to the current, maybe not even. Honestly, it'll probably be more. Not even the new trainers, but even like people like me who've been in the industry for a long time, like pivoting and like, you know, reverting course. Like what would be their advice to them as far as like balancing those two components of our industry?
I like that. That's a great one. Well, Tony, I appreciate it, man. I mean, we joked around that we're like, oh no, we're not going to go that long, but I feel like I could turn this into a Joe Rogan. I got all kinds of questions I could throw at
let's do it.
But I appreciate your time being on here. What's the best place for those who do want to learn more from you, connect with you? What's the best place for them to do that?
That would be my website, that TonyGentilecore.com. So that's all my articles, blogs, podcasts, courses, workshops coming up, stuff like that. So that would be where I would tell them to go.
Love it. So that's the home base, and I'll make sure that's in the notes wherever you guys are listening to this as well, so you guys can check that out. And if you guys took something away from this, make sure you guys do connect with Tony on the social media platforms that he's active on, even if he is avoiding them somewhat, which I don't blame him for.
Somewhat. I'm still on there, but
no
pressure.
You know, and share this with somebody who you feel like might need this. This podcast is really just dedicated towards trying to take the lessons from OGs like Tony and others in the industry and try to do better and make it better for everyone else who's on the same path. So, Tony, I appreciate you being on, brother. And
thank you. I appreciate it.
Seeing you again soon.
Likewise.